So it's an honor to be here tonight in Delaware for this convention, visiting a diocese that has been strong and steadfast in its support of the Episcopal Church for many years and has shared many creative leaders from all orders of ministry to serve in church-wide positions. I think we can get rid of this. So thank you for your witness and your leadership and all that you mean to our beloved church. I'm especially glad to have 3 opportunities to speak to you while I'm here, and I hope that by the end of this evening, Bishop Wright will not, at least by the end of tomorrow, he will still be glad that he invited me to say so much. Your convention theme is Ready, Set, Go, Standing on the Edge of Hope, and tonight I'd like to talk with you about the edge of hope and the kind of leaders we need to be to recognize it when it's under our feet and to help our congregations and communities step over it. Tomorrow morning I want to talk to you about some specific situations in which I think we're standing at the edge of hope and how we together have the opportunity to move forward. We're fortunate to be meeting at this convention with tomorrow's commemoration of Eric Liddell. Anybody know who Eric Liddell is? Raise your hand. Okay, a couple of you. Eric Liddell was a missionary to China and an Olympic runner. He's the Ready, Set, Go portion of the title of this convention. And you certainly will remember him. He was the main subject of the movie Chariots of Fire. I'm not sure if Brad was alive when that movie came out. Anyways, and his life exemplifies much of what I'll be talking about tonight and tomorrow morning. I began thinking about my time with you many months ago when I was in northern Ghana, leading a pilgrimage of nearly 20 people for Episcopal relief and development. Together, we spent a week meeting people involved in asset-based community development, work of ADRO. ADRO is the Anglican Diocesan Development and Relief Organization of the Diocese of Tamale in the Anglican province of West Africa. We met women whose lives have been transformed by microloans that allowed them to open a market stall or raise livestock. We met farmers who were benefiting from new cultivation practices developed for a changing climate. We met a tribal chief who told us about the importance of empowering women, and a bishop, Bishop Jacob Ayebo, who has become an expert in sustainable development. Because, as he says, the gospel of Jesus is incomplete without addressing poverty, disease, and injustice. This was my first time in Ghana, and I had a very clear sense that I was standing on the edge of hope, watching people cross its threshold into new life. It was a holy time, but in addition to everything I learned about sustainable development and goat breeding and mosquitoes, here's a hint: the repellent is only marinade. I also learned again a simple lesson that we all have to learn and relearn throughout our Christian lives. We can always stand on the edge of hope. Sometimes going far away to meet people is a good way to recognize hope, especially if you've forgotten what it looks like. But it's always right under our feet. R.S. Thomas, a Welsh poet and priest of the Anglican Church in Wales, wrote a sonnet that serves as a powerful reminder of the hope we can find if we look for it. And I confess, I'm not a good reader of poetry, so I have asked one of your resident poets to read this sonnet, not that one, but Mark Harris. So Mark, would you come read this sonnet for us?
I have seen the sun break through to illuminate a small field for a while, and gone my way and forgotten it. But that was the pearl of great price, the one field that had treasure in it. I realize now that I must give all that I have to possess it. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. It is the turning aside like Moses to the miracle of the lit bush, to a brightness that seems as transitory as your youth once, but is the eternity that awaits you.
So here we are, no goats, no mosquitoes, no bright fields, just late winter in the mid-Atlantic. And if we turn aside, like Moses, what are we looking for? What kind of leaders do we need to be to recognize that miracle of the lit bush? Since I was elected president of the House of Deputies in 2012, I've spent a lot of time thinking and talking to people around the church about this question. In so many ways, those of us who are leading today's church, whether we are 18 or 80, and I count all of you as the leaders of our church, all of us are standing on a boundary line that marks the end of the old institutional church and the beginning of what the church of the 21st century is becoming. It is our job to stand at the boundary and help others cross. Some of us, like Moses, won't get there ourselves. Others of us are becoming the leaders who will turn the hope into reality. But all of us right now are on that boundary together. Paul Tillich, the great 20th century theologian, wrote about being on the boundary, both existentially and culturally. Actually, he's one of the few systematic theologians I remember from seminary, but he spoke very powerfully in a way that has stuck with me for all these years about being what he called a boundary man. Did you hear that? Okay, let's try that again. He spoke of being a boundary man. In his book, Interpretation of History, with the first chapter also separately published as On the Boundary, this is what he wrote. The border line is the truly propitious place for acquiring knowledge. It has been my fate in almost every direction to stand between alternative possibilities of existence, to be completely at home in neither, to take no definitive stand against either. As fruitful as such a position is for thought, since thinking presupposes receptiveness to fresh possibilities, it is difficult and dangerous for life, which steadily demands decisions and thus exclusions of alternatives. From this disposition and these tensions have come both destiny and task. So, if the boundary line is a great place to think, but a tough place to live and make decisions, how do we know when we're ready to take a step? In other words, how do we know when the boundary line we're standing on is actually the edge of hope? I'm trying to figure out how to place this thing so you can hear me without the popping every 2 seconds. I'm a fan of David Letterman, moving right from Paul Tillich to David Letterman, and I'm fond of his top 10 lists, and I've made a list of the top 10 signs that you might just be standing at the edge of hope. And I hope that you enjoy not only the list, but also the idea that it is possible to interpret Paul Tillich using the methodology of David Letterman. So here it is. Number 10. Your life is grounded in prayer, Christian community, and spiritual practice. We all know that these practices are essential to our well-being and effectiveness, but it is so easy in the busy lives that we lead to fall away from listening to God. So that's number 10. Number 9, you're working collaboratively with other bright, committed people. Remember what Jethro told Moses when he was trying to do it all himself? This is what Jethro said. Moses, what you're doing is not good. You will surely wear yourself out, both you and these people with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. The saying, one Christian is no Christian, isn't meant to make you feel guilty about not going to church. It's not the purpose of that, at least in my understanding. I think what it is a deep recognition that if you are about gospel work, it is too hard and sometimes even too dangerous to do alone. And there's a reason why Jesus didn't travel alone. Number 8, you failed a few times. As my friend and colleague Bishop Sean Rowe of Northwestern Pennsylvania says, now we're looking at new models of ministry, and when we're experimenting and trying new models, we are going to fail a number of times before we succeed. We don't always know immediately what works. He's finishing his PhD in organizational development and transformational leadership, so I think he's probably worth listening to on this subject. And he's actually going to try a new model. He's the youngest bishop anywhere. I think he's 38. He's been a bishop for 6 years. He is currently the bishop of Northwestern Pennsylvania, but in March, the Diocese of Bethlehem will likely elect him as their provisional bishop. So he will be serving as bishop of 2 dioceses as Bethlehem tries to sort out what their future is, as well as Northwestern Pennsylvania. I asked him, how do you think that's going to work? He goes, well, I don't know. I'm going to wait till we get there and see how we figure this out together. 7, you've focused on realizing a positive goal, not just ending something bad. Even if you're working to try to end oppression, discrimination, or injustice, be clear about the vision you have for what the world will be like once you have succeeded. Otherwise, you might keep fighting after the battle is over. Number 6, you have practical knowledge to complement your passion, your spiritual maturity, and your commitment. Church leaders sometimes have a hard time looking to the world outside of our walls to see what we can learn. So seek knowledge and wisdom from people who have it, no matter where you find them. Number 5, you're looking at the glass as half full. Okay, I know that's a cliche, but when you're looking for hope, it's a useful one. Here's how a resource kit from the Asset-Based Community Development Institute explains glass half-full thinking as it pertains to finding hope in a neighborhood. A neighborhood that is depicted in terms of emptiness, and when I say neighborhood, think church. Think your church. In fact, I'm just going to switch the words. A church that is depicted in terms of emptiness, needs, and problems will be on the receiving end of all sorts of services designed and delivered by outside experts. Residents will be positioned as parishioners, and clergy will be positioned as passive, powerless, and dependent on outside help and assistance. A parish that is portrayed as resourceful and gifted will be more likely to draw upon the skills of their own people to address issues and solve problems. Outside assistance and resources may still be required, but the agenda will be set by the parish. People in these parishes are positioned as engaged parishioners capable of shaping their futures. 4, you're being true to yourself. So, have any of you ever seen a picture of Eric Little running? He was the most awkward runner I have ever seen. When he died in 1945, the Guardian article in the UK read, "He's remembered among lovers of athletics as probably the ugliest runner who ever won an Olympic championship." When he appeared in the heats of the 400 meters at Paris in 1924, his huge, sprawling stride, his head thrown back, and his arms clawing the air, moved the Americans and other sophisticated experts to ribald laughter. But his teammate, Harold Abrams, the other runner portrayed in the Chariots of Fire, said, "People may shout their heads off about his appalling style. Well, let them. He gets there." So be yourself. 3, you might just be at the edge of hope when someone powerful disagrees with you. Maybe more than one someone. When you're on the threshold of hope, it's almost inevitable that some force would like you to keep from stepping over it. It could be a power-hungry executive. I'd never say bishop. A power-hungry executive? Certainly not your bishop. A corporation committed to preserving its hierarchy. Government officials beholden to money and special interests, or otherwise good people who are trapped in fear or passivity. I think that's probably, those last two are the things that we, as the Christian community, need to worry about most: fear and passivity. Number 2, you're not in it to be popular. When the great Christian educator Verna Dozier preached at Jane Holmes Dixon's ordination as bishop suffragan of the Diocese of Washington, only the second woman elected as a bishop in our church, Verna said, "Every leader in Christian community most often wants one thing," said Verna to Jane. "They want desperately to be loved." Jane Holmes Dixon, you must find that place in you that wants desperately to be loved and to let it die. And number 1, the number 1 sign that you might be standing on the edge of hope. You know a lot about the hopes, gifts, skills, and assets of the people around you, because you've taken the time to find out what they are. And that's true whether you are looking for hope in your family, in your neighborhood, in your congregation, in your diocese, in the wider church. It's very likely that someone you already know can do what needs to be done, but you don't know it yet, so go find out. From what I know about you in the Diocese of Delaware, I suspect that you know more than many others in the life of the church about how to recognize the edge of hope and step over it together. Bishop Wrights told me about your sometimes challenging restructuring, work to make your diocese simpler and more sustainable, your commitment to children and young adults, your new companion relationship with the Diocese of Mexico, ministries like the Community Resource Center in Rehoboth Beach, and your prophetic social justice stance on immigration reform, capital punishment, and marriage equality. Believe me, I live in Ohio. I'm hoping both for marriage equality and the end of state-sponsored execution. But living in Ohio, I'm not really too close to the edge of hope yet on either of those. I've also read in this month's your diocesan newspaper about the new covenant for the Brandywine Collaborative Ministries, and I'd love to learn more about how you went about that restructuring process, because it sounds innovative and life-giving and something that perhaps could be replicated in other parts of the church. If we had, let's see, how much time do I have? Can I have people talk for 5 minutes at their tables? Are you willing to do that? I know I don't want to stand between this and your nightcap, but well, you know, wherever there are 4 Episcopalians, there's a 5th. So how about if you take 5 minutes at your tables and talk to each other about what's worked for you in terms of crossing the edge of hope into new life. What hasn't worked? What do you know about being leaders on the boundary that you can share with one another? So just take 5 minutes, or any reactions to anything I've said or not. Just take 5 minutes. What's your experience? I'm going to go ahead and cut this a little short because I think we have some people waiting in the wings. But you can continue this conversation at the cash bar if you can hear over the DJ. So I hope you will continue to have this conversation with one another about what you have learned, what works, what doesn't work, and how you can best be leaders at this time of standing at a boundary. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation in the morning, and I'd like to close with a blessing from the Irish poet, John O'Donoghue. Let us pray. May we have the courage to take the step into the unknown that beckons us, trust that a richer life awaits us there, that we will lose nothing but what has already died. Feel the deeper knowing in us, sure of all that is about to be born beyond the pale frames where we stayed confined, not realizing how such vacant endurance was bleaching our soul's desire. Amen. Thank you.